Servus from Vienna, Austria. In today's show I have these topics for you. News from the Microsoft Access team. AEK, the biggest Access conference in the world. Most modern Chart.js in Access, an interview and demos with Möller. News from Access communities and user groups around the world. And finally, an interview with Mike Wolfe, the newest Access MVP. So let's begin with Microsoft. At Microsoft's Ignite conference in November, there was an Access session, held by Nathan Helgreen from the Dataverse team and Michael Aldridge from the Access team. While the title seemed a bit overstated and the subtitle was a bit misleading, it's not about an Access connector to the Power Platform, but only about an Access connector to Dataverse, which is not the same. This is another slide from the Ignite presentation. It essentially says that so far Access has been able to link to SharePoint and to Azure SQL. With the new connector, which is still in beta, Access will also be able to link to Dataverse, which again is not really equivalent to the Power Platform. This is a slide of mine, like all the slides that follow. For us as database people, Dataverse is primarily another backend for the Power Platform, as are Azure SQL and SharePoint and 500 others. Sure, Dataverse is the native backend in the Power Platform and can do more than others, but that's hardly relevant for Access people. I've done customer projects with Power Apps, given presentations and workshops, so I could tell a lot about it and about Dataverse. If you are interested in this, write it in the YouTube comments and I can do a feature on the next show. This time I just want to list a few pluses and minuses about a Dataverse connector to give you an overview and my overall assessment. Dataverse is certainly a reasonable new data source for Access, and it completes the three Microsoft backends that can be used in Access and the Power Platform together. Access has always been in desperate need of positive public relations. Therefore, another plus point is that the fuss about the Dataverse connector is generating some news about Access in the media. This is just one example. On LinkedIn, Ryan Jones, the Dataverse boss at Microsoft, shared the news about the Ignite session and an article about the Dataverse connector. So another part of the technology world sees that Access still exists. Unfortunately, there are also minus points. Dataverse is a kind of black box for database people. The complexity of the Azure services in the background, all the details about storage, indexing, performance, etc. are hidden in Dataverse. As database people and experts, we are not used to that. As mentioned before, the most important point is that you do not need Dataverse to develop Power Apps or the hybrid apps, which are the really important thing for Access people. For these reasons, I expect very little use of the new connector in the Access market. That would be nothing new. We already have such little used connectors in Access. The big problem here is that Microsoft has postponed all other planned new features for Access in favor of the Dataverse connector. And it's not just a matter of a few months delay. In November, the Microsoft 365 roadmap for Access was finally updated. And here you can see the delays. Several features were postponed by 1.5 to 2 years. Just as an example, the third point here. Large address aware is a switch that prevents memory errors in the 32-bit version. Many customers and applications cannot easily switch to 64-bit and have been waiting for years for the memory problems to be solved. It is similar with the inconsistent state bug. I like to call it the monster bug. It celebrates its 4th birthday in May 22. These two issues alone have been costing Access, trust, applications, users, many customers, including large customers, on an ongoing basis and for years. Not to mention the new web browser controller, SQL editor, both of which would positively affect many more Access users than the Dataverse connector. The last Microsoft item I would like to mention is the new feedback portal. User voice was provided by a third party and was abundant this year. For a few weeks now, there has been Microsoft's own feedback portal and a section for Access in it, where you can now write Access wishes to Microsoft and vote on them. Let's hope that it will be more actively managed and have more impact than user voice did. The future will show. This concludes the Microsoft part in this issue of Access News, and we turn to other topics closer to the Access community. And now for something completely different. For the last 23 years, the largest Access conference in the world has been the German Access Developer Conference, or Access-Entwickler-Konferenz, AK. This year it took place again, despite the pandemic. How this was possible and how it went, we now hear from the organizer himself. Only through really good relations and long efforts, Access News managed to get an interview with the guy. Here it is.
Mr. Donaubauer, in times of pandemic, how did you still manage to organize the conference?
Of course, we had strict safety regulations and we held the conference hybrid.
What exactly does hybrid mean in this context?
Well, we had participants on site and we streamed the entire event on the internet.
But it must have been expensive and you needed more staff, didn't you?
Indeed, we had to use quite a lot of technology and there were 6 of us organizing. I think it is better to show you some pictures. The AK usually takes place in 2 German cities with a total of 200 attendees. This is a picture from before the pandemic at the traditional venue in Nuremberg. 120 people in the conference hall. This October, with corona restrictions, it looked like this. It was sold out, but only 50 participants were allowed by the authorities, with 1.5 meters between them, so they didn't have to wear masks all day. Accordingly, our giveaways looked like this. Access experts and MVPs Philipp Stiefel on the left and Peter Döring on the right were the technical team for camera, sound and Microsoft Teams. That was our technical setup. On the right in the picture, the 50 attendees who had a pretty normal 2-day conference locally. On the left you can see that we had sound and video and a chat in Microsoft Teams. This allowed 110 further Access developers to participate online. Of course, there's a lot of preparation, training and some costs involved in such a hybrid event. Here I'm doing final checks with one of the speakers, Intian Koendersma from the Netherlands. In Peter's surface you can see what the AK looked like for the online participants. They had the shared screen of the presenters at the bottom, the speaker's camera image at the top and a chat on the right. Here we discuss an exceptional case from our setup, because we also had a live call to Microsoft in Redmond. Access Program Manager Michael Aldridge and Nathan Helgrain from the Dataverse team kept our community up to date and answered very critical questions with a lot of humor. The assessment of the attendees were very positive, especially by the online participants. They were much better than I had feared before. So I see hybrid as the future for such events, with or without pandemic.
Mr. Donaubauer, you gave 3 presentations at the AEK. Which of them won the audience rating this time?
I only came in second. The winner was Thomas Möller.
Oops, thanks for the interview.
Since Thomas Möller showed a really interesting extension for Access at this AK, I did a more detailed interview with him. He not only gives an overview of his implementation of Chart.js, but also reveals his new project, which I'm sure will again interest many Access developers. So check it out. Thomas, you won the audience vote at the AK. How could that happen with such an exotic topic as Chart.js in Access?
I think the Access developers were happy to see that you can really add external features to Access and thus modernize it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think that's also the answer for me. They were really happy to see you show them a useful extension. Can you show us in a nutshell what this is all about?
Okay. Yes, well, the best thing is to start with a demo, with a small demo and see how it works. We have a demo database here and you can create a chart and that's it. Here is a chart based on some demo data that is in the demo database. And you can set many properties as you like it directly to your needs. You can choose another chart type. What about radar charts? Update the chart and here it is. You like to see it filled? Okay, no problem. Here it is. What about a line chart? Stacked. Okay, here we have it. Datasets 2 is the false data. You want to compare data set 1 and 3. Okay. That's no problem at all. You can choose a color scheme to your needs. And you can show the legend where you like it at the top. Maybe access or no access. Here they are. And you can bring in labels to see how the values of the data points are. So what do you think about that?
So there's more interaction than with the access charts, I think. And it looks more modern.
Yes, it's really, really more modern. I wanted to have a simple integration in your own application. So at the end, I came up with the idea to do an implementation as a class module. And you can import this class module into your database and you're fine, you can work with it. You can then do a configuration via DBA like you do it with Excel charts. We have an Access database and we have the internet here on the right side where we have some content delivery networks where you can find a scripting bibliothèque like Chart.js. And in our database, we have a table containing the data you want to chart. We have the class module I talked about, and we have a form. On the form, we put a web browser control, and this is how it works all together. The module wraps the data from the table, then puts together a string with the HTML code. This is loaded to the web browser control, which is showing the chart. And when we need Chart.js, we call it from the web. That's how it works all together under the hood. But that's only high level. You don't have to deal with it. It's all in the code.
So one of the things you need is an active internet connection all the time.
Yes, you can have an active internet connection all the time. There's another approach. You can download the Chart.js file and save it local on in your file system. That's how you need it, how you like it.
Oh, that's great. If you are independent from the web.
Yeah.
How can Access programmers get it and how can they contribute to the project?
You can get it. If you can get it if you really want. It's all published on GitHub. We have the project with all releases. They are here. And I spent much time working on the wiki to give you a full documentation about all of the properties we have. Let's have a look at one of them. So you get a short description and what the default value is, some sample code, some relations to other objects. That's all in there. So it's really, really easy to use. You have the demo database to try it out and see how it works. And if you really want to contribute and you think there are some shortcomings or you find a bug, no problem. We have the issues tracker here. You can contribute and please feel free to send me your ideas. What can be the next best feature we should implement?
And of course, we will post the link below the video on YouTube.
Okay.
In principle, do you think that this kind of extending access could also be used for other services available on the web, or is Chart.js the only tool of that kind?
Okay, that's also a funny question, but I'm working on another project, the sister project, when you like to call it this way. The next thing I'm working on is pivot tables. Until Access 2010, we had pivot tables. With Access 2013, they were gone. So I'm at the moment working on another project. It's called better access pivot table. And the idea is basically the same. We have a JavaScript on the web, Pivot.js, and we bind it into we deal with it in the same way we do with Chart.js.
How long do we have to wait for the download?
The first releases, as you can see, are already online. This is still work in progress. The principle is working and there's lots of work to do, but you can download it, you can try it, and you can have a basic pivot table experience when you like to have it.
Okay, thanks for the interview, Thomas.
Yeah, was a real fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Now I come to the Access user groups and events in the last and coming months. Not only because of the pandemic, the information situation is not the best. In the Access area, it has always been confusing. My last attempt to sort things out was more than 3 years ago and can be found on the Access team blog. So I'll just get started. Let's start with Europe, which looks like this according to a funny Canadian clip art collection I bought back in the 90s. I'll speak about 3 regions in Europe. Same clip art collection, so that would be Germany. In the German-speaking area, there's a special user group concept, the Access-Stammtische. In English, it would perhaps be called regulars tables or meetings. It is a group of people who meet in a pub or beer garden for schnitzel and beer and either have announced presentations or just discuss their programs, try to solve problems together and so on. Let's use a more structural map for the German Stammtisch locations. Here are the next meetings as far as I could find out. Of course, because of the pandemic in the last 2 years, almost everything is virtual, except for the brave Munich people who almost always want to drink real Bavarian beer together. Let's move on to the British. The UK Access user group had to postpone their last meeting because of Corona. The new date is February 8, and by the way, that long text down there is the address of the venue. I love these English addresses, even though I never know where to go. For details, check out their website. And now to the United States. First to our very active colleagues in Colorado. George Young and his group has once again put on an impressive series of virtual meetings and videos this year. The last one was with Access PM Michael Aldridge promoting the Dataverse connector, which I've already briefly featured in this Access news. Now let's come to Juan Soto's virtual Access user groups. Currently there are 6 of them in English and Spanish. I find the website confusing, even worse since the recent update, but the initiative and the groups and chairs are great, so make an effort to find information about the meetings and videos here or elsewhere. It is often worth it. I'll go to the Spanish as an example because they have a new chairman who is very active, Juanjo Luna, who happens to work in Austria. So if you speak Spanish, check out this user group. The newest group is the Pacific of George Hepworth, who is also working hard to put on interesting meetings. Okay, the last one was Michael Aldridge on the Dataverse connector. Due to the pandemic, I haven't found much from other conference organizers about plans for 22. I am planning my next English language Access DevCon for April, and again virtual. The picture is from this year, where we had 150 participants. In the next issue of Access News, I'll probably provide details about the event. Microsoft awards the title Most Valuable Professional MVP to technical experts who do a lot of community work for one of its products. For Access, until recently, there were only 17 MVPs worldwide. Some weeks ago, I had written in an email discussion that no new Access MVPs would likely be appointed because the product is not hot at the company. Bang! 2 days later, the 18th Access MVP was appointed, Mike Wolfe from Pennsylvania. If you don't know Mike's website, you should watch the following interview to believe what he does. And if you already know it, he's an interesting guy anyway. Mike, what has the MVP title brought you so far, and what do you still expect from it?
So the biggest thing, I guess, is just the credibility. That when somebody comes to the site and they're reading my articles, that there's something there. There's some substance there. It's not everything is. It's not like Microsoft is saying that they're standing behind everything that I write, but that the whole body of my work, they've looked at it, and that's the main thing. Is it just provides some of that credibility, and certainly that.
About Microsoft, I read your Dataverse article. Oh yeah.
yeah. I think it's safe to say that they probably don't endorse everything that I write, which I think is important because there's certainly people will just tune you out if they think that you're just kind of parroting the company line. So I think it's good to challenge them. I think one of the things that I've found is that the developer community in Access is a relatively small number of the overall Access user base. And so I think a lot of the decisions that Microsoft makes that seem to not make much sense to the Access developer community make more sense when you look at it from the standpoint of their main user base is those low-code, no-code users, as they pointed out just at the Microsoft Ignite recently.
So the decisive reason for your appointment is certainly your daily blog at nolongersaid.com. When did you start your blog? Is it already 2 years?
So I started it September 1st, 2020, and I've published an article every single day since then, including Christmas and Easter. Although on those days I've just put some appropriate Bible verses on there, so that I have this compulsion to publish every day, but I don't want to be doing actual work on those days. So that's kind of the compromise that I made. But I didn't want to break that streak.
So you really found some phrases in the Bible containing access or so.
Oh no. No, that would be a challenge.
Yeah. How do you manage to organize such a daily blog with a company and a family? How much of an effort does it take every day?
So it depends on how focused I am, but it's honestly about 2 to 3 hours a day. It's almost like I've added a second part-time job that doesn't pay me anything. I've kind of looked at this as a strategic thing, though, to build up some intellectual property along with my site. I haven't really done anything to monetize it to this point, although I have had some opportunities that came along as a result of writing the blog that would not have come along otherwise, just from the exposure that I've gotten from it.
So in your company, you are the boss, but what about the family? You have to have a strong support there.
Yes, I do. I mostly get the boys down to bed at night. My boys are 7 and 9, and then once they're asleep, I'm usually up a couple hours past my wife writing the articles.
So to summarize it, it's less sleep, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to basically less sleep.
And how big is your stock of topics, and how long can you keep it up? I mean, do you have 100 topics for the next months? Do you have 2 for the next days?
Yeah, so it's kind of a variety. So sometimes I get inspiration when I'm talking to those new developers, and I'm explaining some concept, and I think that would make a good article, so that'll be what I write that day. Other times it'll be a whole series of articles where I'll write one article and it'll spawn 7 or 8 different ideas, and so then that'll be a series of articles that I do. So I've got a huge code base, a big library of standard functions, and so a lot of times if I'm short on ideas, I'll just go in there and I'll scroll through and find one that I think would be an interesting topic, and I'll just write an article about that.
Well, Michael, let me thank you for the interview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl.
So, this was the first edition of Access News. You can find the links to the show in the description below the video. Let's see how often I will create a news program. It also depends on your reactions. Let me know in the comments if it was useful information or not, and what you are most interested in. For personal offers, such as if your work with Access or your user group should be the next issue, you can also reach me by email. Servus from Vienna.
Man.